All right, let's dive into a really big topic, how India's massive tax system, the Goods and Services Tax, or GST, actually works when goods cross its borders. We're talking about the rules of the road for international trade.
So if you're a business that's buying parts from another country, or maybe you're an entrepreneur selling your products all over the world, you've probably asked yourself, where does GST fit into all of this? Well, that's exactly what we're breaking down right now.
When you boil it all down, the whole system for international trade is built on two really simple but very powerful ideas. For stuff coming in, the goal is to level the playing field, making sure foreign goods don't have an unfair tax advantage. And for stuff going out, it's all about making Indian exports more competitive on the global stage.
To really wrap your head around this, the best way to think about it is like a two-way street. You've got one set of rules for goods coming into the country, that's the import path, and a totally different set of rules for goods going out, the export path.
So, let's start by heading down the first lane on that street, the import path. What actually happens, tax-wise, when goods are brought into India?
You'd think the legal definition would be super complicated, but nope. It's about as simple as it gets. An import of goods is literally just bringing them into India from anywhere outside of India. Doesn't matter if it's a giant container ship or a small package by air, if it crosses the border coming in, it's an import.
Okay, now this is the absolute key to understanding imports. Under GST law, bringing goods into the country is treated exactly the same as moving goods from one Indian state to another. The official term for this is an interstate supply.
So what does that mean in practice? Well, it means imports get hit with a tax called integrated GST, or IGST. It's the very same tax that applies when goods cross state lines inside India. And that's how the system creates that level playing field we talked about.
So here's the journey of an imported product. First, the goods land at customs. Second, that IGST is calculated and collected right there at the border. But, and this is a huge but for any business, this tax isn't just a sunk cost. The importer can later claim that IGST back as something called an input tax credit, or ITC, which they can use to offset their future tax payments.
And this isn't just some abstract concept. If you look at the actual customs document, the bill of entry, you can literally see the specific columns where they calculate and record not just the usual customs duties, but also that IGST. It happens right there on paper when the goods clear customs.
All right, time to switch lanes. We've seen what happens when goods come in. Now what about the other side of that two-way street? Let's talk about the export path, when goods are leaving India.
And just like with imports, the definition here is, well, it's exactly what you'd think it is. An export of goods is simply the act of taking them out of India to any place outside of India. Simple as that.
Now, the philosophy behind taxing exports is completely different. It's driven by a core principle of international trade. You should not export your taxes. Why? Because tacking on domestic taxes just makes your products more expensive and way less competitive in other countries.
So, to put that principle into action, the GST law gives exports a very special status. They are treated as a zero-rated supply. And that is the magic phrase you've got to remember when it comes to exports.
Okay, zero-rated. It sounds simple, but what does it actually mean? Because let me tell you, it's a way more powerful concept than just calling something tax-free.
And this comparison just lays it out perfectly. Look, an exempt supply sounds good, right? No tax on the final product. But you can't get back the taxes you paid on all your raw materials and services. That tax becomes a hidden cost. Now, zero-rated, that's the real game changer. Not only is the final export tax-free, but you get a full refund for every single bit of GST you paid along the way. The tax is just gone, wiped clean from the supply chain.
Here's a really simple way to think about it. Imagine you export a cake. Being zero-rated doesn't just mean you don't charge tax on the cake itself. It's like the government gives you a cash refund for the GST you paid on the flour, the sugar, the eggs, even the electricity for the oven. Every last bit of tax is stripped out.
So, how do exporters actually do this?
Well, they've got two main paths to choose from. Option 1. They can file a formal promise with the government called a bond or a letter of undertaking, which lets them export without paying any IGST up front. Then they just claim a refund on their input taxes. Option 2, they can go ahead and pay the IGST on the export, and then immediately claim a full refund of that same tax. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter which path you take. The outcome is exactly the same. Your export leaves the country completely free of domestic tax. Okay, so let's zoom out for a second. We've got these two totally different approaches, right? One for stuff coming in, one for stuff going out. Why is it set up this way? Why does any of this even matter?
It all comes down to one really elegant and powerful rule. Tax what gets consumed inside India, but make sure that anything sold from India is completely free of any domestic tax.
And that's it. That is the core idea that makes GST what economists call a true destination-based consumption tax. The tax gets collected where the goods are ultimately used, not where they were made. That's the whole philosophy in a nutshell.
All right, so let's do a quick recap. What are the key things to walk away with? First, imports are taxed with IGST. This keeps things fair for local companies. Second, businesses aren't stuck with that tax bill. They can claim it back as a credit. Third, exports are zero-rated, which is a fancy way of saying every last bit of domestic tax is removed. And fourth, the whole point of this is to make Indian goods more attractive and competitive in the global market.
Which kind of leaves us with a bigger, more interesting question, doesn't it? When you see how carefully these rules are designed, it shows that a tax policy isn't just about collecting money. It's a powerful tool a country uses to actively define its place in the world economy. It's way more than just numbers on a page, that's for sure.